Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today in our InfoSec seminar, organized by the Information Systems Security and Assurance Management Department in Mahalshan School of Management. We begin our March InfoSec seminar by acknowledging that although this seminar is being held virtually, Concordia University of Edmonton is located on Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many indigenous peoples, including Cree, Salto, Blackfoot, Métis, and Nakota Sioux people. We respect and acknowledge this. We are pleased to welcome Dr. Sharif Al-Barrad, the Dean of Management, and Dr. Andreas Gluso, who have joined us, the Deputy Provost, who have joined us today for this great InfoSec talk. In this seminar, we are pleased to have Ashish Pindari and Sahib Hansbal to give us an interesting talk about technology risks role in digital transformation. Ashish is a governance, risk, and compliance professional with over 16 years of experience and a member of Enterprise Risk Services team at MNB in Calgary. He provides advisory and assurance services focused on information security, cybersecurity compliance, and IT risk management. Ashish supports organizations across several industries, including technology, energy, financial services, and manufacturing. His expertise includes third-party assurance such as SOC 1 and SOC 2 reporting, cybersecurity compliance, and internal audit programs. He also works with organizations to meet regularity requirements such as Sarbanes-Oxley Act and the Canadian Sarbanes-Oxley. Ashish holds multiple certifications including CISA, CISSP, CIBP, BMB, and CCSK, and earned a Bachelor of Engineering from Walchand Institute of Technology in India. Sahib is a manager in the technology risk practice at MNB with experience supporting organizations across industries such as banking, energy, insurance, and the public sector. He specializes in IT general controls, cybersecurity risk assessment, SOX compliance, and internal audit. Sahib has worked with organizations regulated by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board and the Canadian Public Accountability Board. His work includes managing IT audit procedures, evaluating IT control environments, identifying control gaps, and supporting remediation efforts. He also assists organizations preparing for US SOX compliance and support executives and audit committees in strengthening governance and reducing risk exposure. Sahib holds a Master of Information System Security Management from Concordia, University of Edmonton, and a Bachelor of Technology from Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. Thanks, Ashish and Sahib, for being with us today and sharing your experience with our audience. Just quick notes during the presentation, microphones will be turned off to avoid interrupting the speaker. At the end, we will have 10 to 15 minutes for questions and the microphones will be turned back on. Please limit yourself to one question to give opportunity to other participants to ask. If we have enough time, please feel free to re-ask again. And at the end, I will share the registration and feedback form with you. So please provide your name, email address, and a brief feedback so we can send your certificate of attendance. So thank you, and the floor is yours, Sahib and Ashish.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Professor Islam. So since you have already gone through my introduction, I would still again just introduce myself to the crowd. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sahib. I'm a manager in the technology risk practice at MNP based out of Edmonton. And as Professor Islam mentioned, that I help organization across different industries, banking, energy, oil and gas. So I've been doing IT audits, cyber maturity assessments, and also dealing with clients who are regulated as per PCAOB and CPAB. Um, I have been with the MNP for more than 4 months now. Before my time at MNP, I also worked at Deloitte for 4 years. doing the same kind of work, and I'm also a proud alumni of Concordia. Did my MISM in December 2021. That's when I graduated. So it's always great to be back. I can see some familiar names in the attendees as well. So hello everyone, and looking forward to take you through the deck we have prepared and go through some, key technology risk areas today. I'll pass on the floor to Ashish for an introduction as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sahib. Thank you, Professor Islam and Sean, for providing us the opportunity. I won't take long on the introduction. Professor Islam did a great job of talking about me and what I have done in the past. But just briefly, I'm a partner at MNP in MNP's Enterprise Risk Services practice. I am based out of Calgary and been with the firm for 4 years. And overall, I have about 20 years of governance, risk, and compliance experience in a variety of different capacity. Yeah, looking forward to speaking to you all and get deeper into technology risk and digital transformations. So I'll pass it on to Sahib to really kick it off, and then yeah, we are looking forward to this. Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, as you can see on my screen, we do have a brief agenda over here for the 5 areas we'll be touching as a part of this presentation. So we'll be going through, what is digital transformation and why does technology risk become so critical? We'll go through 4 key risk domains and talk through some of the examples that we have over there. And we also have a digital transformation risk model that is applicable to different organizations who are looking to do digital transformation. For some reasons. So yeah, and then at the end we'll be discussing about the governance model for managing transformation risk before we conclude. So yeah, looking forward to deep dive into those topics now. So yeah.
All right. So thank you, Sahib.
No problem.
Well, let's start with what is digital transformation, right? Let's spend a few minutes to really understand what transformation means. So, organizations across every industry are undergoing what we broadly call digital transformation, right? But it's important to understand that digital transformation is not simply about implementing new technology. It represents a fundamental shift in how organizations operate, make decisions, and deliver value to customers. Digital transformation involves the strategic adoption of modern digital technologies to fundamentally change business processes, operating models, and customer experiences. So you will typically see digital transformation initiatives such as ERP modernization that you see on the screen, which is moving from legacy ERP systems or other silo systems that you will see in organizations to platforms like S4HANA or Oracle Cloud or other ERPs for that matter. Then cloud migration is something you hear on a day-to-day basis. That's shifting infrastructure from on-prem environments to cloud-based environments like AWS or Azure or GCP. Adoption of SaaS platforms such as Workday, NetSuite, or Salesforce, implementation of advanced digital and analytics platforms such as Snowflakes or Databricks to really centralize large volume of business and customer data for performing analytics or decision making, leveraging Power BI or Tableau type of platforms. Deployment of AI and automation tools such as predictive analytics models, use of AI copilots and agents, and robotic process automation to automate decisions and improve operational efficiency. Another common transformation initiative is the creation of digital customer platforms. That would be implementation of mobile apps or customer self-service portals or API-based ecosystem that connects customers and partners directly to the organizational services. So the important thing to recognize here is that digital transformation simultaneously changes your technology architecture or business processes, organizational operating models, and the control environment as a whole. So while transformation creates significant opportunities for efficiency and innovation, it also introduces new type of risk that traditional governance frameworks were not designed to address. Sahib, if you want to move to the next slide.
Of course.
right? So why technology risk becomes critical? You heard on the previous slide that digital transformation programs are complex. They touch multiple systems, multiple vendors, and multiple business functions. As a result, they frequently disrupt existing control structures. Let me illustrate this with a few common examples we see in real transformation programs. The first example I want to talk about is ERP implementation. So when organizations move to modern ERP platforms like SAP S/4HANA, they typically redesign finance processes. This redesign often impacts key financial reporting controls, and common risks would include things like segregation of duties conflicts when roles are redesigned, or data migration errors when legacy data is converted, broken system interfaces between financial systems, and improperly configured access controls. In many cases, organizations realize these issues only late in the implementation process and sometimes even after go live, which is, you know, introducing a lot of risks uh, to these transformations early stages of the transformation, which creates a lot of issues after go live as well. The second example would be cloud migration. So when organizations move infrastructure to cloud platforms, the security model fundamentally changes. In traditional environments, IT teams controlled most aspects of infrastructure security. However, in cloud environments, we operate under what is called shared responsibility model. This means security responsibilities are split between cloud provider and the organization. Common risks that organizations encounter would include misconfigured cloud environments, weak identity and access management, lack of visibility into cloud workloads, and data protection challenges. These issues have been behind many high-profile data breaches in recent past. Another very common transformation initiative is the adoption of SaaS platforms such as Salesforce and ServiceNow. While platforms provide scalability and operational efficiency, they also introduce third-party dependency risks. Some of the common risks you will see with these initiatives are limited visibility into vendors' control environment, reliance on vendor security and availability, integration risks between SaaS and internal systems, or data residency and privacy concerns. This is why organizations often rely on mechanisms such as SOC reports or third-party risk management frameworks when adopting SaaS solutions. The last example I want to touch on that you see on the screen is AI development. Organizations are increasingly embedding AI into business processes. It's the buzzword now, right? So, what are those? These are automated credit decisions or predictive analytics, use of AI copilots or agents, intelligent customer service systems, and a variety of other use cases that you hear from on a day-to-day basis. But AI introduces a completely new category of governance challenges. These include, to name a few, model bias, lack of explainability, poor data quality in training data, unclear accountability for AI decisions, and many others. So these risks go far beyond traditional IT controls and require new governance structures. Yeah, thanks, Sahib. Now let's really dig into some of the core technology risk domains, which are important when you think of digital transformation and risks related to that, and how do you go about managing those, right? So if technology risk becomes increasingly critical during digital transformation, the next question is, what are the key areas organizations actually need to manage? To answer that, we can break technology risk into four core domains. The first is financial reporting and IT controls. When organizations implement new systems, particularly ERP systems, they must ensure that the changes do not weaken the control environment that supports financial reporting. This includes controls around access management, system changes, data integrity, and how different systems exchange information. These controls are especially important during large ERP transformations where systems, processes, and data structures are being redesigned. The second is, third-party risk management. Modern digital environments rely heavily on external vendors. For example, organizations increasingly depend on cloud providers, SaaS platforms, managed service providers, and even external AI vendors. Because these vendors often host critical systems and data, organizations must ensure that they maintain strong security, operational controls, and compliance with regulatory expectations. The third one that you see here is cybersecurity and data governance. So, as organizations expand their digital footprint through cloud platforms or APIs and data ecosystems, their exposure to cyber threats also increases. This area focuses on protecting systems and data through mechanisms such as identity and access management, secure cloud architecture, data protection controls, privacy governance, and continuous security monitoring. In a highly digital environment, protecting sensitive data becomes a fundamental requirement. And the final one, we really want to cover for today's presentation is AI governance. It's hard to keep AI governance outside of the core domains, core risk domains from digital program assurance, is because AI is being leveraged everywhere in all organization now. So with the increasing adoption of AI and machine learning, new governance challenges emerge. AI governance focuses on ensuring that these systems operate responsibly, transparently, and reliably. This includes validating models, applying ethical AI principles, establishing governance frameworks for how AI is used, and monitoring AI driven decisions over time. This is one of the fastest evolving areas of technology risk today and needs to be addressed from risk standpoint. I will pass it on to Sahib now to really double click on each of these risk domains and take a few examples to really decipher that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ashish, for the brief overview of those key risk domains. Since Ashish has already introduced us to the four key technology risk areas that organization must manage during digital transformation, the very first one that we have is financial reporting and IT controls, which becomes particularly important when organization modernize their financial system. So there could be a case where organization is planning to implement a new ERP, get rid of their legacy system. They they might have plans to automate their financial system processes or migrate data from one platform to the another. Maybe it was hosted on prem earlier, and then they want to migrate data onto the cloud. System integrations become an important part as well of digital transformation that might affect financial reporting because there might be some data flowing from one system to the other one. So it becomes very important to make sure that the data flow is working as intended and there are monitoring controls in place just to safeguard in case something goes wrong, so that the financial systems are not left in an idle position. So I do have some of the risks listed over here, like the key risk areas that we have. First one being segregation of duties conflict. So like this is a key risk area when it comes to ERP implementation, along with the other three listed here as well. So let's say when an new ERP system is implemented, roles and access privileges are redesigned the the organization. And then if not carefully managed, a single user might have access to, I'll give you an example, to initiate and approve a transaction. So which creates a risk of, having fraud and error as well. So how could we tackle that? So management need to make sure that they are, while doing an ERP implementation, they are also looking at the nested permissions within a role, not just looking at the role and then assigning it to certain individuals. The second one that we have over here is migration errors. So when organizations move data from legacy system to newly implemented system, like there could be case where incorrect or incomplete data is transferred. This could lead to inaccurate financial reporting. Third one that we have over here is uncontrolled system changes. Especially with the modern development environments and DevOps pipelines, systems can be updated frequently, and management needs to make sure that proper change management controls are implemented. There could be changes that may be implemented and could have a financial impact. So let's say, the management has an in-scope report which processes financial transactions, and somebody made a change to that key report, and then the report is not, showing the result as intended. So that could create a risk in that case. The very next one that we have over here is interface failures. So financial systems rarely operate in isolation. They are always integrating with one system or the other one. So if these interfaces would fail and data transfer may be halted, like financial reporting could be affected eventually. And then in order to address these risks, organizations have to implement control. So for example, the very first one we talked about, which was segregation of duties conflict. So management could tackle that risk by implementing access management controls to ensure proper segregation of duties are enforced, assigning role-based access to individuals when they are hired. So that really becomes very important. And another example would be, so let's say a user is transferring from one role to the another. They need to make sure the role which is no longer needed is removed as well. They do not have conflicting access as a result of the transfer. For the second one, which is data migration error, data integrity tool controls could be added just to make sure there is validation of the migrated or the processed data, just so that the values are tied apple to apple. Next one is change management control. Again, we talked about it briefly as well, but management needs to make sure that there is a proper log created for each and every change. Person who developed the change is not implementing the change, and there is testing and approval done before implementing a change into the production. So that becomes very important. Fourth one we have over here, which we could implement for interface related failures, is interface monitoring to ensure the system exchange data flow is working accurately. How they could do those is by restricting access to appropriate individuals. So the key takeaway is that digital transformation might modernize financial system, but it also introduces new financial reporting risk, which organization need to take care of. So moving on to the third party risk. So while strong financial and IT controls would help organizations to manage the risk within their internal system, digital transformation increasingly rely on third party technology providers. For example, cloud platforms, SaaS application, data hosting providers, and other vendors who could help in, networking functions and changes, updates, all of that stuff. And as a result, managing of these third-party risks become the second key area that an organization must address. So just to give you a brief context, like modern digital architecture depend heavily on vendors. Organizations often rely on SaaS platforms like Salesforce, SailPoint, Workday, ServiceNow. Like there are a lot of platforms out there which are SaaS products. And then cloud infrastructure provider like AWS, Azure. Like while these technologies enable scalability and innovation, they also introduce new dependencies and risk outside the direct control of the organization. So as a result, there are key risks which arise. So the very first one here is SaaS downtime. So let's say if a critical SaaS platform experiences outages, it could disrupt business operations because that application is helping with the business operations only. So, for example, let's say if a cloud-based finance system goes offline, employees might not be able to process transaction or access financial data. This could lead to, certain events that the business do not want to have. Second one is inadequate SOC reports. So since I mentioned earlier that the organization rely on controls implemented by the third party, it becomes very important for them to review SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports, especially SOC 1 report when it comes to, if they are, if they have a external auditor performing their financial audit as well. SOC 1 report would be the one that the auditor would ask them to provide. Just to understand, how the vendors manage security and operation control, and if there are any qualifications noted within the report. It, it may indicate that the vendor control environment is insufficient or sufficient. Third risk that we have over here is cross-border hosting. So many cloud providers would store their data in multiple geographic locations. And then if sensitive data is stored outside permitted jurisdiction, organizations may face some compliance issues, or they have some regulatory requirement that they need to abide by. So let's say an organization has PII on their system, and they only need to store their data in Canada, but the cloud services provider stores the information in a server which is hosted in Europe or Africa or Asia. So that's a risk that organization has to take care of. And finally, single cloud dependencies. So some organizations rely heavily on just one cloud provider, and if that provider experiences a outage or disruption, the organization would have very limited, alternatives for that. Some of the controls that they could implement could be vendor due diligence, making sure they are following a checklist before, onboarding a vendor, doing SOC report reviews. So the SOC reports I talked about, SOC 1, SOC 2, they are going through the control environments, and so these SOC reports are provided by external parties, like they are testing the third party's control environment. So those could be relied upon. Contractual control requirement, just to make sure where the data is hosted. Continuous monitoring for vendor performance and risk exposure as well, just to see if there are any kind of cyber incidents that is happened at the vendor. So basically the key takeaway that I have for this one is, even though digital transformation extend the organization technology ecosystem beyond boundaries, it also introducing a risk, and there is a need for the organization to manage this third party risk efficiently by going through some of the controls which I mentioned earlier. Moving on to the next stream, which is cybersecurity and data governance. So in the previous slide, we have already gone through third-party risk, which focuses on risk which arise when organizations rely on external vendors. However, as organizations are using cloud platforms, another critical area would emerge, which is cybersecurity and data governance on the platforms that are there. So these technologies significantly expand organizations' digital footprint, which also increases exposure to cyber threats and data leakage risks. So, when digital transformation are occurring, uh, there would be system data which is moving to cloud platforms. There could be systems which are getting connected through APIs, centralizing large volume of data using data and analytics platforms. So these all, create certain, risks and challenges which are there. So I'll walk you through some of the key risk areas. So the very first one being misconfigured security. So when organization move their system to the cloud, security settings must be configured correctly. And then misconfigurations such as, open storage buckets or giving excessive access to someone could become a cause of data breaches or leakage as well. The second key risk area over here as well is expanded attack surface. So again, like as the digital footprint is increasing, the attack surface is increasing. Third is data breaches. So these cloud platforms has large volumes of data, and with large volume of data, it becomes very critical to make sure that that data is protected and appropriate controls are in place. Finally, poor data lineage. So as organizations rely more on analytic systems, it becomes very important to understand where the data is coming from and how it flows. And without the clear lineage, it becomes very difficult to ensure, accuracy, compliance, and proper governance. So just to explain some of the controls that could be implemented by the organization to address this key risks. First one being cloud security architecture should be there just to ensure secure configuration of the environments. Identity and access management control. Again, this is an overlap from one of the controls I talked about in stream one as well. Data classification and protection control, just to make sure. So let's say if the data is highly confidential, should not be leaked. There should be more protective controls in place for that. And then privacy compliance program, just to ensure that the data is handled as per the regulations. It varies differently based on the geographical location. And then basically, so the digital systems could be expanded through cloud platform, APIs, data environments. That's how cybersecurity and data governance would become very foundational to the digital transformation. And then strong security architecture, incident management controls, and data protection controls are required to ensure that digital transformation remains secure and compliant as well. Moving on to the next area, which is AI governance. So we already discussed about cybersecurity and data governance with focus on protecting system and data as organization expand their footprint. However, digital transformation is increasingly going beyond just infrastructure and data, and then organizations are also embedding AI and machine learning into their decision-making process. It leads to creation of a new category of risk, which is why fourth key area, AI governance, is required. So like we have seen, AI systems are increasingly used in areas such as predictive analysis, fraud detection in the financial system, recommendation engines, automated decision making uh, capabilities that a solution might have. So while these technology would create powerful capabilities, they would same time, but they also introduce risk and you know certain areas which are not covered by the traditional IT controls. And then the table over here highlights some of the key risks areas. The very first one being model bias. So if training data used to build AI model is let's say biased, not representative, the model may produce unfair decisions. For example, AI hiring tool is used. There could be a case where the tool is trained on historical hiring data, and then it would unintentionally pick up a candidate whose profile was not even matching to the newer requirements. Second one, lack of explainability. So AI works like a black box, meaning it is very difficult to understand the concept of why AI produced this result, like what are the things it looked at. So this becomes a problem when organizations need to explain decision to regulators, auditors, or their clients. Third one is data quality issues. So AI models usually rely heavily on quality of data used to train them. And if the data is incomplete, something would fall apart. Finally, governance and accountability gaps. So we have seen that organization like sometimes lack you know laying out clear responsibility for different AI models just to see who is approving the model, like who approves them, who monitors the performance of the model, and who is accountable if inaccurate result is produced. How we could tackle those, how management could tackle those, could be done by ethical oversight, fairness testing just to detect bias, model validation just to make sure the data set it has is up to date, data governance to ensure high quality training data is used, and then using AI governance frameworks that will define model ownership, approval process, and monitoring responsibilities. So that's AI governance for us. Now I can deep dive into the transformation risk model. So basically, we have touched all the layers of the transformation risk model by now, um, which are financial controls, third-party risk, cybersecurity, AI governance. So this slide brings those elements together in a simple transformation risk model. So at the top, you could see digital transformation layer. That includes ERP implementation and all the other examples that we just went through. Second one is transformation governance layer. So it is, organizations need a transformation governance layer. And then this is where the program assurance come into play. So it would ensure that risk and control considerations are built into the transformation process from the beginning rather than just being implemented at the end. And then again, the four key risk domains which we just talked about. So the key idea over here is that digital transformation risk cannot be managed in isolation. It requires a coordinated governance across multiple, risk domains. Moving on to the very next slide. So this is basically, laying out different transformation phases, starting from planning, solution designing, implementation, go live, and then operations. So for example, in the very first stage, organizations would, select the cloud provider they want to go with. So the risk team would work on this phase just to make sure they are evaluating the vendor properly, and then the vendor has a layout in place to make architectural decisions, and just to evaluate vendors control environment, and then also considering the data residency requirement. So that comes into the planning phase. Second one is solution designing phase. This is the area where some of the controls would be designed, segregation of duties design, security architecture would be designed, data protection mechanism would be falling under this category only. And then the next one is implementation. So during implementation, the focus is more on configuration and testing of controls. So making sure that access controls are working as intended, implementing security configurations, testing system integration and interfaces which are there just to see if there is nothing going wrong. And moving on to deployment and or go live, this includes monitoring system access, managing change control, and ensuring operational controls are functioning properly without halting the business. The very next one is operations, so that is post go live. And finally, once the system are in operation, organization shift to ongoing monitoring of the controls, which we just discussed about earlier. So basically, the key takeaway over here is that effective digital transformation requires risk and control consideration to be integrated through the entire life cycle, and not just like it would not just affect the systems which are implemented, but also the whole business process that the organization have. So those are some of the areas which I wanted to touch, and I will pass on the floor to Ashish for governance model for managing transformation risk.
Yeah, thanks, Sahib. All right, so well, up to this point, we have discussed the key technology risk domains that emerged during digital transformation, but identifying risks alone is not enough, right? The critical question organizations face is who is responsible for managing those risks, and how do we ensure proper oversight and assurance? This is where the four lines of defense model becomes an extremely effective governance framework. So what is the governance challenge here, right? The governance challenge here is digital transformation introduces core cross-functional risks that spans across multiple parts of the organization. For example, finance teams are impacted through ERP implementations or transformations. IT teams are managing cloud migrations. Procurement teams are managing third-party vendors. and data teams are implementing analytics and AI systems. All of these changes creates risks that no single function can manage independently. So organizations need a governance structure that clearly defines ownership, oversight, and assurance responsibilities. The four lines of defense model that you see on the slide, it provides exactly that structure. It establishes clear accountability across the organization by distinguishing between those who own and manage risks, which is the first line, those who set policies and oversee risks, which is the second line, those who provide independent assurance, in most cases internal audit, and we can also call it third line of defense, and those who provide external validation, which is often external auditors or independent third-party assurance auditors. This governance model ensures that risk management is embedded across the four core technology risk domains we discussed earlier. Now, if you look at this conceptual model on the slide, digital transformation sits right on the top. Below that sits transformation governance or program assurance, which ensures risk is embedded throughout the transformation lifecycle, as I have mentioned in previous slide. And then underneath that governance layer sits the four lines of defense, each playing a different role in managing risk. So the key message here is simple. Effective transformation risk management requires clear accountability across all lines of defense. When organizations clearly define these roles, transformation risk can be managed proactively rather than reactively. Now, let's do a quick time check. I know it's 12:46. I do have two more slides, which we can maybe quickly go through. And then, pass it on to the audience here for questions. Let's take a closer look at what each line of defense actually does during the digital transformation. Each line plays a distinct role in ensuring risks are identified, controlled, and independently validated. The first line of defense, which is business and technology owners, it consists of teams that design, build, and operate the transformation. These typically include business process owners, ERP implementation teams, cloud engineering teams, or AI development teams. And these teams are responsible for owning and managing operational risks. At the front line, they are implementers. Second line of defense would be risk and compliance oversight teams within the organization. It provides governance and oversight. These functions typically include enterprise risk management function or cybersecurity governance teams, third-party risk management and data governance teams, or AI governance committees. The role is to establish the framework, policies, standards that guides transformation program. The third line of defense is internal audit. Internal audit provides independent assurance that the first and second lines are effectively managing risks. During digital transformations, internal audit may perform, engagements like transformation program assurance review or IT control readiness assessments, cybersecurity maturity reviews, and vendor risk governance reviews, and a variety of other audits and risks that they want to cover as a part of the transformation program. And then finally, fourth line of defense is typically an independent external validation, right, which includes external auditors, regulators, independent cybersecurity testers performing pen testing and vulnerability assessments, or SOC assurance reports from service providers. Together, these four lines ensure that transformation risks are identified, controlled, monitored, and independently validated. And if you move on to the next slide, Sahib, I wouldn't take too long on that, but of course, we're going to share this deck with the team here. But all we are trying to explain here is literally go through those four key risk domains that we covered through our presentation and really lay out some examples on what that first, second, third, and fourth line, what role they will play on each of those risk domains or verticals. This is where I'll conclude our presentation and open the floor for questions.
Thank you so much, Ashish and Sahib, for this interesting presentation. Just very quick announcements before we take questions. So we are delighted to announce that our well-known master's programs, MESAM and MISAM, will be launching an online cohort starting on September 2026. Beginning in September, classes will be delivered synchronously in the evening to accommodate working professionals. So we are hosting an open house today at 6 p.m. MT time. So I'll share the link with you. You can register here on this link.
The
And
link,
please,
I already put the link in.
great. So we can put it again. So feel free to share this link with your colleagues and anyone who may be interested. Also, please provide your name, email address, and the brief feedback so we can send your certificate of attendance of today's great InfoSec seminar. Time for questions. I will return the microphones on. Yes. So please go ahead. If you have any question, please raise your hand. Hello, Nikhil, do you have a question? Any questions from our audience? So we have a question in the chat. Ashish and Seep, can you read it?
Sure.
Yes, if you see it, please go ahead and answer it.
Yeah, let me open the comment section. So reading it out loud just so everybody could listen to that. So how do you operationalize accountability for digital transformation risk across the 4 lines of defense, especially when ownership overlaps between IT, finance, procurement, and business teams? So
Thanks. Thanks for the great question. This is the question that organizations have to ask themselves, right, as they are structuring themselves or preparing for a digital transformation program. It's a great question because there is definitely a lot of overlap between what IT, finance, procurement, and business teams have to do as a part of this digital transformation program. And that's precisely where the governance part of the program assurance comes into play, right? Truly defining a proper governance structure for having a proper program assurance in place is extremely critical to the success of a digital transformation program. Truly identifying specific role that the governance team has to play in ensuring that operational teams are doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of implementation. They're working closely with system integrators to ensure that there is a proper input and output feedback loop in terms of what solution integrators are supposed to be doing and what are their SLAs from contractual agreement standpoint. Second line has, of course, a significant role because they are the ones who will ensure that all of the work that's happening is falling within the guardrails of policies and procedures and standard laid out by the company, right? So security requirements are being met, controls are being considered as a part of this program, and a variety of other aspects from second line standpoint. And procurement has a significant role to play because you have to onboard solution integrators, system integrators. You have to onboard cloud systems. You have to onboard other vendors, service providers. And to ensure that there is a proper onboarding process being followed, which is in alignment with the policies or processes you have in place as an organization, they play a significant role. They ensure that those requirements are being met. There is a proper due diligence program in place. Security requirements and privacy requirements are handled appropriately as you onboard, and not just at the time of onboarding, but to ensure that it's done consistently throughout the uh, tenure of the engagement of the program. And of course, third line of defense, fourth line of defense has a role to play. If an organization has a formal internal audit function, which most organizations do, but some smaller ones they don't do. But considering it's a large transformation program, you're basically talking about an organization who's most likely have an internal audit function. And internal audit has a significant role to play to ensure that they are participating in this transformation journey from the very beginning, right? They are part of every phase of the project to ensure that risks are being covered appropriately with a separate lens, right? With an independent assurance lens. And not just from financial control standpoint, but all the four domains we spoke about, right? How are those really handled as a part of this overall project or program is critical to the success of the project. So pre-implementation work as well as post-implementation reviews across all of those four verticals. And external assurance is important because you can't really uh, your organization is not able to ensure that all controls are in place because there are vendors involved in this process, and certain controls will be vendors responsibility, right? We spoke about shared responsibility. That's an area where you may have to rely on a report issued by an external auditor, which is a SOC report that vendor will provide you on a periodic basis. You have a responsibility to ensure that as management you're reviewing those reports to ensure that those are not qualified reports, to ensure that you're comfortable with the posture of vendors controls, right? And ensure that though there are no risks being presented as you continue working with those vendors. So yeah, I mean, like hopefully that addresses your question in some shape and form, but happy to address any follow-ups you may have on this.
Thank you. Any more questions? Any more questions? So I have a quick question. So how can organizations maintain strong IT like general controls and the change management without slowing down like innovation or delaying go live timelines?
You want to take a stab at it, Shahib?
Yeah. So for this one, Professor, so they need to plan ahead. Like they need to know what their risk program looks like, what's the amount of effort they could put into place, and then they need to, have a risk control metrics in place just to make sure, what is the risk they are trying to address, what is the value that it is providing them, and what is the amount of time they are putting into, addressing that control, just to see whether that risk could be accepted, that risk could be transferred to an external provider. So that kind of maintaining that kind of risk control metrics becomes very important. And then once you have all those risks laid out, it becomes easier to track those controls periodically. So some organizations might need a user access review quarterly. However, some would want to do it annually because they have very few individuals on their system. But for those who have like 1,000 people and then multiple managers working with the co-workers that they have which are reporting to them, it becomes important to have that control implemented, you know in a more frequent manner. So that's how I will lay it out. And yeah, it depends on control to control, but having a risk control matrix just to lay down what are the controls you need, that is very important.
Yeah. Thanks, Saib. And I'll just add on one thing here. Your question is how do you ensure that your controls are in IT controls specifically are in place without slowing down the overall transformation progress? Well, there is a fine balance, right? You can expedite your transformation journey and not heavily focus on controls, and then eventually get to a point after going live where you are encountering issues, multiple issues in terms of keeping up with your ICFR compliance, or keeping up with external auditors' questions, or encountering issues in performance of the system, access-related issues resulting into breaches. Well, that takes a whole lot of time and resources, right? And of course, presents a lot of inconvenience from day-to-day operation standpoint. So why don't we build all of this as a part of your transformation program to ensure that everything is done right, and at the time of go live, you will have a smooth operation. You will have achieved your objectives without spending too much of time and resources on addressing these issues reactively as opposed to doing it proactively. So to me, they're not separate. They're part of the same journey, and they should be planned and handled accordingly to ensure the objectives are met and to ensure the success of the program.
Great. Thank you so much. So before we wrap up, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Ashish and Sahib for sharing their expertise with us today. We truly appreciate you taking the time to speak with our community. We look forward to seeing you all next time. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks very much, guys.